name is Annabelle Connerly. Today I will be presenting vitamin B1/thiamine deficiency. For my introduction, I chose this disease because I read about it in a HOSA book last year, and I thought it was interesting because of the diseases in the book, this one was probably the most treatable, and most patients have a full recovery, and I felt like that was cool. And it's also very preventable because it's just a deficiency. Okay, thiamine and vitamin B1 are interchangeable terms, they're the same thing, and this deficiency actually has several names. It goes by beriberi, which, fun fact, was because, well, it's kind of a myth. The Sandhili language, beriberi means I cannot, because patients, they would ask them to move and they would say I cannot, because of the damage to their nerve and muscles. It also goes by dry beriberi and wet beriberi, which we will get into because there is a difference, and Wernicke and Korsakoff psychosis, but most of the time those are put together as Wernicke-Korsakoff as the same thing, which we will also get into in a little bit. Cell communication. First, generally, cells can either communicate locally or by long distance. Local cell communication is one cell sending out a signal and cells right by it receiving it. Long distance communication is a cell, like a brain cell or something, sending out a signal and it traveling via the bloodstream to wherever it needs to go. Cells have receptors on them that bind to these messages and do whatever the signal says.
Do you have on your board?
I do actually. This image is supposed to be a neural cell. It's right here on my board, image 1. If it would load, you could see the cell receptors, the neurotransmitters, and there's a space in between neural cells that is called the synapse. The synapse is how the messages travel. If there's anything in that synapse, they can't communicate, which is actually what we're going to get into. So cell communication with B1 deficiency. Thiamine makes up an enzyme that cells use to deliver components of their respiration cycle, the Krebs cycle specifically, too. If they don't have thiamine, they can't go through this Krebs cycle as efficiently as they should. So they start to build up lactic acid, which is a result of anaerobic cellular respiration. And as this lactic acid builds up in between those neural cells, the receptors are blocked, and so are the neurotransmitters. So they're no longer getting the messages they need. So that's what goes wrong with thiamine deficiency. And thiamine specifically does go to a lot of higher metabolic areas, which are your brain, your heart, your liver, your pancreas, your nerves, and your muscles, which are, of course, things that you really need to, function properly. So when you have a deficiency in thiamine, these really important areas aren't respiring like they need to, and they can cause a breakdown. These are your signs, symptoms, treatments, and prevention. So for these, actually, I've broken them down into about 6 parts, which are here on my board, because they have been broken down kind of. There are severe cases, which can result in multiple sclerosis, heart failure, or damage to the heart, which is probably one of the only lasting symptoms, and that's only usually in infants who experience thiamine deficiency. In babies, it can cause encephalitis. In infants, it's developmental delay, which is unfortunately, they found that out because in Israel, there was a formula malfunction and it didn't have enough thiamine in it, and a bunch of babies experienced the symptoms I'm about to talk about, and it took them having to test that. But fortunately, after they were treated with thiamine, they pretty much went back to normal. There were very little lasting symptoms. And in acute cases, they start off kind of like fatigue, irritability, poor memory, a loss of appetite, sleep disturbances, abdominal discomfort, and weight loss. And those are also the early signs. Peripheral neuropathies means pins and needles in your fingers and toes and stuff. And then in babies, they can be fussier or more irritable than normal. And as it progresses, your limbs start feeling weaker. You start experiencing the pins and needles almost constantly. You don't know what your limbs are doing. You kind of lose control. And then these are Wernicke and Korsakoff. Usually they are put together because beriberi kind of progresses into these two, but they have have been broken down further, with learning being confusion, apathy, kind of mood swings. They can't walk like they used to, a gait change. They have eye problems. It starts off with kind of a paralysis and stuff like that. And it can lead to a coma or even death if untreated, because this is the most severe part of thiamine deficiency. And the course of psychosis is usually defined as specifically they lose like little parts in their memory, especially short-term memory, and so they make up things in there. And I actually want to stop right here. And the book that I got this out of, I want to read a passage from it because it explains the symptoms in kind of a more personal level. So just to preface it, so I don't read for forever, this is talking about a lady named Lisa Park. She was absolutely so, like, you know, she was a vibrant person. She was doing all this and this. All of her friends and family knew her as someone that was active. And she got married in whenever. And so this starts off after about 15 years after she got married. It says, for the first 15 years of their relationship, Lisa took care of Johnny, his children, and their collection of dogs. She practiced algebra with Johnny's youngest son, who had been failing classes ever since his mother died. She convinced Johnny's daughter to stop skipping school. She stocked the refrigerator with healthy food and encouraged Johnny to exercise. Speeding around town in a red roadster, she was forever a woman on the mission. Then, in 2015, Lisa's feet stopped working as they used to. Instead of lifting up from the ground as she walked, her toes hung low, intended to trip her. Walking into a party store to buy Halloween decorations, her foot caught a ripple on the gray entrance road. She fell, fracturing several ribs. Within a month, tingling sensations crept from her fingertips towards her shoulders. The prickling feeling of pins and needles kept her awake at night and distracted her during the day. She tried taking hot showers and cold showers, applying menthol cream and taking pain relievers. The harsh sensation spread, invading her lips and then her tongue. Whatever was happening, she soon realized she could not fix it with her usual toolbox of wrenches and stoicism. Her ankles weakened, followed by her knees. She resorted to counter-surfing to move around the house, asking Johnny to pull chairs and couches into the middle of the room so she could transfer from one surface to another without having to stand by herself. Finally, Lisa traded her foaming Coke and designer slacks for a stiff hospital gown that tied loosely in the back, intended to leave her exposed. Over the next 28 days, doctors ordered brain scans, spinal cord pictures, a lumbar puncture, and a nerve study to get to the root of her ills. Eventually, the physicians concluded that Lisa's immune system was the problem. Listening intently to their jargon, Lisa gleaned that her body had attacked the shiny sheaths that surround her neurons. The covering was critical for an electrical signal to travel from one end of a neuron to the other. Without it, she understood, her nerves could not communicate with each other. With Johnny by her bedside, Lisa watched optimistically as clear bags of medication emptied their contents into a long tube that led into a blood vessel in her arm. She imagined driving around town in her convertible again, cured by treatments that would reverse the devastation of the prior months. Thinking her strength would recover, she returned home, but the medications did not work. A divot began to develop on the large cushioned chair in the living room where Lisa planted her body from the time she got out of bed in the morning until she crawled back to her room at night. She began using a wheelchair to get around her house. Johnny moved the furniture again, this time hauling couches and side tables to the perimeter of the room so there was space for the wheelchair to make turns. By 2018, Lisa was becoming more and more confused. Most days she forgot she had retired. She would wake up early and beg Johnny to bring her a blouse from the closet, worrying she would be late for work. When she looked at photos, pieces of images crept into her reality. A picture of her new grandson was elaborated into a birth story that had never occurred. An image of a celebrity would turn into a full-fledged story of a brush with fame. Instead of being a place to store experiences and factual information, Lisa's memory became a tool for confabulation. Fictions inserted themselves into her recollections, creating a truth that never was. So, they eventually found out that they had kind of hidden something from the doctors. Lisa was an alcoholic. So, the alcohol caused her thiamine deficiency. As you can see, she was making up memories. Her body wasn't working like it used to. She had dry beriberi. This is associated with nerve and muscle, and that led into Korsakoff syndrome. She was making up memories. Wet beriberi is associated with heart failure. Your blood vessels dilate constantly and it overworks the heart into failure. This is image 2, it is also seen on my board right there, of a dilated artery working too hard. And the treatment is just taking thiamine. Usually it's by mouth. If it's more severe, it's intravenously, and they usually send patients home with a multivitamin because vitamins kind of go together with deficiencies. And the prevention is just eating a non-monotonous diet because the people most susceptible to this are people who eat mostly rice and staple foods like that that are kind of processed to the point where there isn't any thiamine in it. And then to limit alcohol consumption. There are foods shown in image 3 right here that are very high in thiamine, and they're shown right here too. And then these are more